So in this session, I want to talk to you about one of the leader shifts in my book, and it's the shift from goals to growth. And I really want to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about, and that is just your personal growth and your personal development. Because improving yourself is the first step of improving everything else in your life. It's very true that we're always anxious to improve our circumstances. We're always anxious to fix the things around us. But so many times we're not anxious to improve ourselves and fix ourselves. And so the whole teaching of this is that when we start in life, you probably started off like I did, and that is with goal setting. And well, let me just tell you a story. Kirk Campmeyer, when I was in my early 20s, asked me what my plan for growth was. And the bottom line is I didn't have a plan for growth. I didn't know that I was supposed to have a plan for growth. He was the first one that kind of made me aware that, John, growth's not automatic. If you're going to grow, you have to grow intentionally. And so I said, okay, I'm going to grow intentionally, but I didn't know how to grow. I mean, no one ever, it's one thing to ask yourself if you have a growth plan, but I didn't have a growth plan. And I went to my friends and asked them if they had a growth plan, and none of them did. And so I desperately began to say, well, how do I grow myself? How do I develop myself? And so I brought something very personal to me today because I'm holding in my hand where I started my growth plan. This is the dynamics of personal goal setting, and it's Personal Success Planner, and it was by Paul Meyer, Success Motivation Institute. And this is where I started. This is my first, in fact, paid $799 for this, okay? And when I paid $799 for this, that year I started off as a pastor. That year I made $4,800. So this was huge. This was a lot of money, and I had to save up for it. I didn't have that kind of money. And so really 6 months of trying and saving, we finally got to this. And so this is where I started. And it's just very important. It's very special to me. But I started my personal growth plan with a goal setting teaching. And it's got cassette tapes in here, and it's got workbooks, and I worked it through. And I really went through this personal growth plan 3 times. The first time I got it, I threw it back to get some more, and it took me, so I went through it 3 times. But the reason I brought this with me today is for a couple of reasons. One is this is when people say, what's the best investment you've ever made in your life? The best investment I ever made in my life is right here. The $799 I paid, which was an awful lot of money for me, the $799 I paid has been worth millions of dollars for me. The return is incalculable. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to challenge you in a personal growth way to invest in yourself. In fact, if you wouldn't invest in yourself, why should anyone else invest in you? I'm always amazed at people who want me to scholarship them. Could you kind of give me a free lift? And my whole process, no. If you and I don't bet on ourselves, why should anyone else bet on us? The first bet that I ought to pay is on myself. And so this is my first kid, and so I brought it with you today to say that I literally started my whole growth life, goal setting. And isn't it interesting? I'm talking to you about how do you and I leader shift? How do we shift from being a goal setter to a person that just really works on growth? Because here's what I realized when I started in my growth plan. What I realized was this: the goals I achieved were not as great or as important as the growth that I was receiving in my life. That yes, I was setting goals and I was stretching towards those goals, and it was a good thing, but there was something happening internally to me that was more than places I wanted to go and numbers that I wanted to reach. And I experienced 2 what I call growth changes that I want to give to you. Because I think that when you get on a growth journey that's intentional, you'll discover these same changes also. And the first one is very simple, and that is that I went from growth in everything to growth in essential things. When I started off with growth, I just said, well, I want to learn everything. And so I just read and studied and listened to tapes, and I just did everything I could to grow. And I was just grow. And one day it hit me that was never going to get me to where I wanted to be. That I had to go from trying to grow in every area and everything to grow, get essential. What are the main things that you just need to grow in? Now, for me, in my 20s, I came to the conclusion that if I could be successful in relationships, if I could become successful in training and equipping people, if I could have an incredible attitude that would help me be an overcomer, and if I could learn to lead and increase influence, if I could do those four things, relationships, equipping, attitude, leadership, if I could grow in those four areas, then I probably could be successful. And so I committed that these are the areas I'm going to grow in. And so I began to eliminate a lot of stuff so that I could grow in what I would call, for me, the main stuff. And I would say to each one of you in all of our sites and here locally, that what you've got to do is when you start your growth plan, becoming intentional, you got to ask yourself, what are the areas I'm going to grow in? You can't grow in everything. You don't even want to grow in everything, but you got to grow in the essential things. For me, REAL, relationships, equipping, attitude, and leadership. And later on, I added communication because I knew that I would spend my life as a connector and a communicator. And because I am a person of faith. And pretty much for 40 plus years, these have been my 6 essentials. Learning how to connect with people, learning how to train, equip others, having an attitude to help me overcome, learn how to lead and expand influence, learn how to communicate well, and then become the person of faith that I really want to become. This is where I really spent my time. The second change I had in the area of growth was I went from growth with a timeline to growth without a finish line. Now, this was an amazing experience that I had because when I started my growth journey, I thought in terms of, well, okay, there'll be a finish line somewhere. There'll be a time when I've accomplished that. There'll be a time where I have achieved this. There'll be a time where I have arrived. And so I had a timeline out there. And I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you spent an hour a day every day on a certain given subject, now that's back to the essentials, REAL, that stuff. If you spend an hour a day every day on a certain given subject for 5 years, you could become an expert on that subject. Now, that really excited me because at this time I'm falling in love with leadership. I'm buying into the idea everything rises and falls on leadership. And so here we go. I'm excited, and I said, okay, I'm going to spend an hour a day every day for 5 years to become an expert on the subject of leadership. And that's what I did. Now, back then, there were not a lot of leadership books out. They were mainly management books. If you go back in the 70s and 80s, you go into bookstores, you didn't find leadership books. You found management books. And so I read some management books, and it kind of got me going in the right way. But I would talk to people that were leaders. I would try to do leadership experiences an hour every day. And every day, every week, as I would go through this process, I'd ask myself this question: how long will it take? Well, Earl Nightingale said it'd take 5 years. Well, I'm not only reading and studying and learning and experiencing. Guess what else I'm doing? I'm counting down. I think I'm Mr. Cape Canaveral. And I'm going, 5, wow, 4, 3, and I can smell it. It's out there. I'm getting close. There's going to be some light in this tunnel pretty soon. And I was about halfway in this 5-year run of countdown until something happened. It wasn't anything I read. It wasn't anything that somebody came and sat beside me and mentored me on or kind of gave me some thoughts or advice. About halfway in this journey, the inside of me switched. I was receiving so much value from my personal growth. I was learning so much about leadership. I was growing so much internally that I stopped counting. And I left the question, how long will it take? And I picked up the question, how far can I go? That was the day that no one ever had to motivate me again to have a personal growth plan. That was the day that I saw the big picture, and the big picture is there's not a finish line. That you can continue to expand. And one of the things I learned was after 5 years, I wasn't an expert on leadership. I mean, I really liked Earl Nightingale, but he was wrong on that one. Because one of the things I found is in 5 years, instead of being a master of this leadership gift and all this stuff, see, the more you know, you don't know. Come on. And the more you know you don't know, the more you want to know, because you don't know enough. And so if you don't know enough, you want to know more, so that the more you know, the more you don't know, you can someday know what you didn't know. Some melancholics say, "Oh, John, excuse me, repeat that one more time. Just repeat that one more time." I can still remember my mentor, one of my mentors in writing. I was in his office one day, and he had a chart of his books that he'd written, and I'd read all the books, and it had over there 110,000 copies sold. And I looked at him, I said, "Wow, I haven't even, I'm just starting off to write." And I said, you sold 110,000 copies? He said, "Yeah, I have." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, that's going to be my goal. 110, my mentor, 110,000 copies." And then I thought, that's a dumb goal. Why, instead of trying to reach a number, why don't you just become a better writer? You see, I went from goals to growth when I fell out of love with the destination and I fell in love with the journey. All of a sudden, I realized that more important than really reaching a certain place in my life is what happens within me, internally, that begins to give me a greater appetite to learn more and to grow more and to be more. And so it really took the emphasis off of doing, of which I was doing, and put the emphasis upon being. What am I becoming as a person? What is it doing for me? That the journey is so much more exciting than the definition. So okay, how do we shift? How do we shift? I'm not anti-goals. How do we shift from goals to growth? Number one, embrace change. It's just that simple. Embrace change. Just fall in love of how you're growing. You don't leave something when you really start growing internally. You don't leave something, you go to something. And so when I'm talking to people that are growth oriented, they're always talking about where they're going and the growth that they're having, and there's a real sense that they're getting better. So you just embrace change. Just embrace change. It's a prerequisite for growth. Number two, make your love for learning greater than your fear of failing. Just fall in love with learning, and because it's better than the fear of failing. And so when I go into projects, there are a lot of times, I shared with you earlier, when people ask me about transformation of country and, what do you think your odds? I think they're very low. I'll leave Sunday for Guatemala and go speak to 40,000 people that are leading round tables of 5 to 6 people each, 10 people. They're leading probably 300,000 people, and I'll go and I'll pour my life into them, and I'll train and equip them and do my best to add value to them. And you say, well, what are the odds? Well, the odds, there's just, it's probably not going to happen. But I've fallen in love with learning. I've fallen in love with growing, and the more you love to grow, the less the fear of failure will have a grip on you. Number three, develop relationships with growing people. It's just good to hang around people that grow. Man, I'm better today because I've hung around people that have inspired me. Number four, believe in yourself. In the 15 invaluable laws of growth, I talk about the law of the mirror, and the law of the mirror just simply says you must see value in yourself to add value to yourself. So how I think of myself, from a 1 to a 10, if I see value in me, if from a 1 to a 10, I say I feel like I'm an 8, guess what? I'll invest an 8 in myself. If I think I'm only a 3, I'll only invest a 3. You will only invest the number in yourself by the way you see yourself. And so that the better that we see ourselves and the more value we put ourselves, the more that we'll invest in ourselves. Number 5, embrace what I call layered learning. And layered learning is just simply, you take one life lesson and then you build another life lesson on top of it, and then another and another. And pretty soon, what you're working on and what you're learning about, it begins to be layered, and there begins to be a depth to it. I was just in Kenya working with transformation of the country, invited by the president. And so there are 5 million kids that have been going through my leadership curriculum there. And the last thing I did in Kenya before we came back is I went into a room of about 500 students that they had been going through my leadership stuff, and half a dozen of them got up and they taught the other kids, and I was right on the front row. They shared with me what they had learned about leadership from me. And I'm just taking notes on my little iPhone while we're doing that. And when they finished, each one of them gave a little leadership point that they had learned from my stuff on their life. And then I went in and I taught them layered learning. I said, okay, now this is what you learned from what you read about my leadership stuff. Now let me teach you something else about that same subject on leadership. And I was just layering the learning. And what happens is when you become a growth person, you begin to get a depth in your life, because it's not one lesson and it's not one example and it's not one experience. It begins to stack up until you begin to have a layered learning process there. I tell people all the time, you're never good the first time. It just always amazes me when people say, well, I'm really working hard. I've never done this before, and I really want to do a good job. And I just smile and say, relax. You won't. You're never good the first time. I'm not good the first time. But we do the first time so we can have a second time and a third time and fourth time. And then it begins to stack up, and then it begins to layer. Somebody told me the other day, said, John, you just sit up there and you suck a cough drop, drink water, sit on a chair and relax and communicate. You go, how did you get there? It's very simple. I've done this 12,000 times. Let's put it this way. If I'm not any good at it now, I picked the wrong career. Layered learning. And let me just give you one more. Let me give you one more. Have an abundance mindset. You can live either, and it's a choice. It's just you can live in scarcity or you can live in abundance. Just have an abundance mindset. There's more out there than you ever could imagine. There's more before out there than you could ever imagine. Just trust me. As you get older, one of the things that happens is as you get older, you have less certainties than when you were young. When I was young, I had a lot of certainties. In fact, when I was young, I was amazing. You just come and ask me a question, I could give you an answer. I was just incredible. I was Mr. Answer Man. I just was so sure of everything. And as you get older, you get that knocked out of you. But what is beautiful as you get older, your certainties list kind of drop off. But when you get to my age, the things you are certain about, you're more certain about than you've ever been before, because they've been tried and proven and tested. And one of the things I'm really more certain about than anything else is this incredible abundance mindset that there's more for you. There's more for you than what you and I are right now receiving. There's more out there. And I want you to have that. I want you to be able to make this day a day of dreams, and a day of expansion in your mind, your heart. Okay. Let me ask you a question. How many of you, how many of you, have you ever thought you had a really good idea, and so you acted on it to only find out that it was really a bad idea? Can you connect with me? Huh? Look around. We all been there. Haven't we been there? I mean, you think you really had a great idea and it wasn't a good idea at all. Well, I've had that a lot. I brought with me I really have a great idea, which is a pathetic idea. It's my jar of marbles. Yeah. You see, I heard a story about a guy who got up to about 65 and he began to think if, he could do 10 more years and in life, that would be 50 weeks in a year, and that would be 500. He's got 500 more weeks, and so he got this jar of marbles, and every week on Saturday he'd take off the lid and he'd reach in there and he'd pull out a marble. It would remind me, kind of count my days, make my days count, because I'm going down, I'm counting down now. And I thought, that's a great idea. So I went to Mark Cole, my CEO, and I said, Mark, there's only going to be X amount of years with the John Maxwell company, John Maxwell team, and so let's get some marbles. And I gave him the marbles with how many we'd have in. I think I gave him like 300 marbles or whatever it was. And I said, what you do every week, just kind of pull out a marble. Now me thinking, this would be the highlight of the office. This went on for about 6 months. And all of a sudden I thought, you've had a lot of stupid ideas in your life, Joe. A lot of, real stupid ideas. This may be the grandfather of all stupid ideas. So I got my team together, got some of my close people together, and I said, let me say something about the marbles. I've been trying to, count down. And so I'm kind of counting my days, but I don't think I'm making my days count. It doesn't matter whether you have 100 weeks left or 1,000 weeks left. Dive, buddy, dive. Quit counting down. Quit being Cape Canaveral. Quit taking one marble out at a time. And so I brought my group together and said, I'm done with we aren't doing that anymore, because I've decided to just dive into life, and I'm going to live till I die and not get the two confused. And so I looked at them and I said, here's what we can do with these marbles. Come on. No more marbles. Grab hold of today and make today count. Make every day your masterpiece. God bless you. Go from goals to growth and really make your life count. Thank you very much.